Today is October the 30th, 1999. We're in Covington, Kentucky with the 12th Armored Division reunion. My name is Charla Henson, and this afternoon I am interviewing Saverio Ignatti.
Saverio, yeah.
Saverio. Okay, thank you. Give me your full name and where you're from and the year you were born, the date.
Name and the date. Well, my name is Saverio Ignatti. Most people call me Sal. And I was born in Rochester, New York. And my birthday is December 4th, 1920.
Tell me about your mom and dad, your mother's name,
My
where she
mother.
was from, and your dad.
Well, my father came to this country first at age 16 years old, landed in New York, and he was in the Syracuse area of New York, and he was single, came with his dad. His dad did not like it, went back to his country, and my father got a job at the age of 16 years old in a paper factory. And my mother came over here when she was about 17 years old, from a different part of Italy. They did not know each other. And she came here with her oldest sister, who just passed away and was 102 years old in Las Vegas. I thought the 102 years was quite a thing. And anyway, she came here and she started to work in a button factory, she told us. But then she met my father and they got married. And in those days, her oldest brother introduced my mother to my father, and if they didn't approve, they didn't get married. That's the way things were. But anyway, my mother got married and was a housewife, and her first child was a boy. And
Is that you or somebody else?
it was a brother. And
Give me his name.
his name was Saverio also, believe it or not. And then he had a daughter. My mother had a daughter, and her name was Veronica. And then there was a second daughter. Her name was Mary. And then I was the fourth. And then I had a brother named Michael. And then there was another brother named Dominic. And the youngest sister, who came sometime later, she was born in 1931. And her name is Lena, which they call her Lee. So my mother had a total of 7 children. And there's my oldest brother died of the flu after World War II. I mean, one rather. World War I, they had the flu. They called it they didn't call it the flu then. Anyway, they did not know how to treat it, and a lot of kids died at the age of really under 5 years old. There was a cousin also at that time that passed away. There's a big cemetery in Rochester, and it's all these kids that died after World War I. I'm trying to think the name that they called it, but maybe it'll come to me. It was not the flu. It was the same thing as the flu. It was one of the flus, an epidemic.
Tell me what led you into the Army, and where were you drafted?
I was drafted.
You were drafted?
I was a draftee.
At what age?
At 21. They were taking them in at 21 then. I registered when I was first become 21. You had to register. That was law. But they didn't get to me till October. October 13th, I went for a physical. And I passed the physical. They give you 2 weeks to get your stuff in order and be ready to leave. So on the 27th, I left Rochester.
Okay, so you and one other brother served in
Europe.
In Europe,
Mhm.
okay.
My other brother, by the way, is younger. In other words, they cleaned up all the 21 years they could get mustered out. And then they went for the 20. He was 20 years old. He went in a month later. They had dropped it to 20.
Tell me about where you had basic training, and then, as I understand, you were at
Camp Campbell.
Campbell?
Yeah.
Okay.
I left home by train from the New York Side. They call it the New York Side Railroad. And there were 40 guys, and we went to Buffalo. Went to Buffalo. We had lunch in Buffalo. And then we got on the transit bus line of Buffalo and went to Fort Niagara, which is, I don't know how many miles, maybe within 20 miles away. And we got there in the middle of the afternoon in our civilian clothes. Right away, they said, you know, we would have to get dressed for uniform, get ready to get uniforms, and they wanted our civilian clothes and wanted to send them home as quick as possible. They don't want kept it around there. So we did that, you know. I don't know if we put them in a box or a bag, but they put us in the barracks, and the shots and everything started the next day. I was only there 39 hours, about 2 nights, just enough to get everything, you know, in order, shots, and we took tests for IQ, of course. And then we left. After the third day, we left on a train, which was backed into the camp there at Fort Niagara. And I think there was over 600 troops, recruits that got on there. And it took us about 2 days to get to Camp Campbell in Kentucky. And we got there in the afternoon.
What was your impression of Camp Campbell, and what was it like to be going there? How did you feel about that?
Well, we didn't know where we were going. Everybody, you know, rumors, all kind of rumors. What camp we're going to go? We don't know, you know, all kind of rumors. Everybody they like to know where they're going. When you're on a train, crowded train, and they had MPs on there, kept order, you know. And nobody, as I say, we didn't know where we were going. We didn't know if it was a old establishment, a new. We found out when we got there, it was a brand new camp, and there was no grass, and where they unloaded there wasn't a platform. It was a ditch, and it was mud, and it was clay, and when clay is wet and you're on a slope, you just slide all over the place. It was a mess. Our uniforms got dirty all around our pants, and we had all these hardball sergeants right off the bat. Fall in here. Who the heck knows what fall in means, you know? You'll learn fast enough, though. But fall in a line of 3s or 4s, whatever there was, and after he got so many men, he started to say march, and he started counting. We never went through that stuff before. And all the cussing starts right after that. You bunch of, you bunch of young recruits, we'll show you how to march and all that. So anyway, they marched us, and some of the guys had nerves to say, well, where are you taking us? You'll find out, so stuff like that. They weren't very polite. Supposed to give you, start you off right, no, this is not going to be an easy life, which it wasn't. But I guess everybody was hungry. The kitchens weren't set up. They weren't set up to feed anybody. So they says, well, there's a what they call it, service building where you can buy candy if you get there. But from what I can remember, was very hungry, didn't get anything. There was no candy to be bought or anything. And it took quite a while to get us into a company. Well, the first company I got to, I went right to, most of the guys that I went with, they all were separated and went different directions, different outfits, And I landed in Company E of the 56th Regiment. And it remained a regiment until we got to Barclay, which was over a year. We stayed at Camp Campbell, got my basic in Camp Campbell, and from what I remember, the basic training lasted something like 13 weeks of basic training. And then the cold weather, was in November. The weather was cold. It happened to be very cold, damp. And there was a lot of guys who got pneumonia. There was a lot of them walking pneumonia, and a lot of guys landed in the hospital. And it was we just had shoes. We were walking around with just plain shoes, no rubbers or anything. So I can remember we were quarantined at one time, and everybody, where you slept between beds, you had to have they used the half of a pup tent, so we wouldn't get everybody else's germs. And this went on for quite a while. We couldn't go to town. We were quarantined. So anyway, basic training was not an 8-hour affair to begin with. I don't know, numbers of hours. You got up at 5 o'clock in the morning. They used to have that song. You get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. You don't know what hour you're going to retreat. But we always had breakfast early, then dinner. We used to come in for dinner. And if they would say you got the night off, a lot of guys would rush to town. And especially if they drank beer or something, which I was never a drinker. I was never a smoker. And I used to stay around the barracks and write letters to my family. At first, that's, you know, I always kept in touch with my family. We were always close. But one night, a mess sergeant came in and says, you get into the mess hall. I got something for you to do. I says, well, I says, I haven't pulled the mess sergeant. I mean, I haven't pulled any KP. I says, I thought it's supposed to be posted on a bulletin board. Well, he says, I need you. He says, get in there. This was when I was a recruit, see. Well, I did as he told me. Got to the kitchen, and I guess he was a wise guy because he says, see this floor here? I want you to scrub this floor. I said, okay. Now, how do I do that? So he gave me a pail, and he says, put that solution in there and mix it up and get on your knees and start scrubbing, which I did. And he had some friend of his. They were sipping the coffee and laughing, you know, because I figured like they were laughing at me, you know, they're making a fool out of me. So I did the job, and I thought I would be let go. No. He says, no, he says, you're going to clean out the grease pit. Well, then I knew that this guy was out, you know, to belittle me, and I said, okay, where's the grease pit? I'll show you where it is. And that's a filthy job. It is a filthy job. What did I do to deserve this? So, okay, I cleaned it, and no gloves on, no rubber gloves or anything. And the stuff is filthy as all heck. I cleaned that out. And I think I asked him for something to drink. He says, no, you're all done. You can go back to your barracks now. Well, on my way to the barracks, I says, this guy's not going to get away with this stuff. I may be a recruit, I says, but he's not getting away with this stuff. The next day, I walked right into the first. After breakfast, I walked into the orderly room, which is where the first sergeant is, and told him what happened. And I says, if he's got a right to do that, I says, then I'm going to scram like the rest of the guys. I says, where he won't be able to get a hold of me. I says, because I'm not going through that. I says, if I'm ordered to do the KP, I says, I'll do the KP, but not the way he did it. I says, he just wanted to pick on somebody. And I said, I don't know the guy from Beans. He says he had no right to do that, and he won't do it again. He says, I'm glad you came in here to tell me. I says, fine, that's it. Never happened again to nobody else. It had to be posted to go to work in the kitchen. It had to be posted on a bulletin board for the next day, not for the same night.
Let's scoot on over to the Tennessee maneuvers.
Tennessee maneuvers. We left in September. We left Camp Campbell in September with the half-tracks, you know.
What was 56? Tankers, artillery?
No, infantry.
It was infantry? Okay.
The 56 regiment was all infantry, 3,000.
Oh.
3,000 doughboys. And we went to Tennessee, and we went to the heart of Tennessee, the Watertown area, Lebanon, some of the names I remember. And you lived outdoors. You didn't go into any barracks. We lived in tents, pup tents, 2 men to a tent. And the weather at first was pretty good. Then it got to be very, very cold and a lot of rain. I can recall one night we went to sleep, and we woke up. We were laying in the water from the rain. The ground was a low area, in a wooded area, and we got pretty wet. And you know, they don't have anything to replace you. You have one set of ODs and fatigues. I don't even know. We had the ODs, but I don't know if we had the fatigues yet. But so they says, okay, from now on, before you pitch your tent, you cut pine tree limbs, put them on the ground, and that'll keep you from getting wet. Build it up enough so the water can get through. So that's the way we used to go to sleep, and it wasn't very comfortable. You only had one blanket, one military blanket, period. You usually used to have to throw that on top of you. So all you took out, maybe, sometimes you'd go to bed with your shoes on. That's a lot of guys would like to take their shoes off. And then you would stand up and you'd stand up in the water and mud. So that wasn't very nice. But that was nice that you didn't go to bed. The problem, they call them problems, military problems, war problems. You were up all night long. Didn't get the food. Already they started, the kitchen wasn't available. And you go out there, if you didn't have some candy bars, you'd be hungry. And of course the guys start griping, is this the way it's going to be?
Was that anything like what you faced in Europe?
Yeah, it's a train maybe. Sounds like a train.
Are we off?
What?
Did you turn me off?
Sounds like a train.
Okay, I was asking you before the fire line came on.
Mm-hmm.
I was asking you about did the Tennessee maneuvers prepare you for what you really experienced? The wind, the rain,
Well, we had. They say I was one of the early birds, one of the first ones that came to Camp Campbell. The camp at that time, the 12th Armored Divisions as a whole had to have 14,000 to be completed, to be in full force. And then they break it down as you know it right now, with all these flags, all the different outfits. Okay, we had some pretty rugged maneuvers in the month of February. I know we went on maneuvers, and the next morning we slept in pup tents. We froze ourselves, out there. And the mud had frozen. The half tracks were parked out there in the field. There was so much mud that it froze, and we couldn't move those half tracks. And the only way you could move them was with picks to break up the ground, and with bars. It was a hard thing to loosen those tracks on, so we could move them and go through with the maneuvering. This is what they call winter maneuvering, I guess they called it. We stayed about 3 days. Took about 3 days. We must have had 2 or 3 different maneuvers. They call them mini maneuvers, rather. But the one down in Tennessee started in early September, October, November. It was about 2.5 months. And it gave us some hard times. I mean, the food, we didn't get food. Those days we never saw a warm meal. And they didn't, they say if you didn't have a pocket full of candy bars, if you didn't leave the camp with candy bars, you'd had nothing to eat. We were on, one night, they had us guarding a big field, and we had to go around and around this big field. Didn't make much sense to us, because we all griped about it. With our weapons, our helmets on, everything. We saw some houses nearby. So the sergeant says, who's got the guts to go to one of those houses and get some food? So he says, we got to do something. He says, we just can't. He says, don't get out in this road. There's MPs going up and down. And you just stay right on the land. All myself and another guy, I forgot his name, but we went to the first house. We knocked on the door. As we did that, a Jeep pulled into the driveway. We immediately ran to the backyard and hid. And then when we could hear the Jeep had backed out and got on the road, we went back, and the lady was standing there. We were telling her, and she knows. She says, I know what you guys are going through. She said, because of other maneuvers. And I said, well, we'd like some bread, anything you want to throw at us. I said, we'll pay for it. And she brought all the leftovers and milk, anything. Part of everything was all leftovers and no full bottles of anything. So we took the stuff. I said, how much you want? She didn't know. She didn't care. She said, just go back. But we gave her some money. I forgot how much it was. Well, anyway, we got back, and there were so many guys there. I think if I got a piece of bread, a slice of bread, that was about it for all my efforts. And the other guy, everybody was hungry, just grab, like a bunch of vultures. And that was quite an experience. I said, oh, my I don't want to be doing this all the time either. But I'll tell you, it was not good for as far as living conditions. It was terrible. And as I say, a lot of you didn't have good conditions of sleep. You're up all night, a lot of nights, and I don't think you could do it if you were an older person. Just could not put up with that kind of a life. But it was rough maneuvers, and it got to be a cold maneuvers because when we left there, it was snowing. It was actually snowing. Where this train came from, these trains came from, cars of them, into the field. There was a track there, and that's how we loaded up. And in those days, the heat circulated through those trains through a pipe, hot water. And they had turned them on. The engine, the water comes from the engine, and making all kinds of noises, you know, cracking. Oh, you're going to get heat pretty soon. And we touched the pipe, and it wasn't even warm. And the guys, you know, they wanted some heat after waiting out there for these trains to come. But we loaded up, and we were on our way to Barclay. We didn't know where. Again, there was a big secret where we were going, but we went to Barclay. It took a long time. I think it was more than a day's trip. I know that. That's what I remember. We went to Brownsville, I believe, down the southern part of Texas, and then the train worked back north to Barclay because they had railroads all the way into the camp. We unloaded, and the infantry, they always give the infantry the worst living conditions, you know, because these guys are going to be outside, and these guys are not going to. You got to give them something tough because these guys got to be out all night long. There's no rest, no such thing as rest for them. Well, anyway, they put us in those little plywood barracks. I don't know how many there was. There weren't too many, but in the barracks, they had a lot of barracks. But some had better barracks. But the infantry was all located in one area. And that's when the big change came from the Pentagon, that the armored divisions were reconstructed and divided into 3 units, A, B, and C. A and B were supposed to be the 2 leading elements, and C was supposed to be in reserve, which never happened overseas. And we happened to be in C, Combat C. In other words, the division was split in 3 units, and they used the C as well as they did with the B or the A. There was no partiality there. We all did spearheading. That's what armored is all about, spearheading. They used to call it mechanized, and we, at first, that's all we did was walk. There was no such thing as half-track. Then they started getting half-track. But when it comes to fighting, you have to get out of the half-track in most cases. 95% of the time. Very seldom do you fight on a half-track.
Tell me about your first impressions of Barclay. And who was your captain?
I believe when we got to Barclay, and we were in B Company, I think that Captain Arndt, a school teacher, 27 years old, was our I'm pretty sure. He was a country boy, even though he was a teacher. I became his runner. He wanted me as his runner, you know, go between the platoon, 3 different platoons at the time. And first thing he asked me, he says, "How's your sense of direction?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, how do you know which direction you're going?" He says, "With a message." He says, "I'll be giving you a message. You got to know where to go." If I say go to the 1st platoon, they would be in a certain area, and 2nd, 3rd platoon. Well, I said, "I don't know." I said, "I'm kind of a outdoor individual." I says, "I love outdoors." I said, "I used to hunt when I was 16 years old. Out outdoors a lot. I was on a farm." "Oh," he says, "this sounds good." He's like, "Yeah, he said I was a farm boy." Okay. So I became his runner. And he used to run like a deer. I mean, his steps were, you know, real long steps. He was hard to keep up with, but I used to keep up with him. And, of course, I weighed about 160 pounds, and I kept up with him. He was a low-profile individual. He didn't talk too much. And while I might see, he would say to me, he says, "You know, I'm ready to hit the sack." He says, "You know where my what do you call it? It was sort of a mattress. It was rubber, and you had to blow air with your mouth, and it wasn't the easiest thing to do. And that's what he would sleep on. It was about less than 3 foot wide, and that's what he would sleep on. Then I heard also, personally, he had hemorrhoids, which were bothering him something terrible. And couldn't sit, he couldn't lay down too good. But he didn't complain. He really didn't complain very much. And he'd get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. He says, we got to get these people up. He said, go and get the clerk and tell him to go around and wake these people up. I said, okay, sir, and he was a captain. And I would do that, you know. And this is when we were on maneuvers. We had a lot of maneuvers. And when we got there, we had a lot of maneuvers. But then they transferred to a service company. And it seemed like we had first lieutenants coming from other companies that were with A company maybe. They were using them, or C, or headquarters, or service. But I think they sent him to service company because it was for his health, because of his problems, health problems. And because to leave him in there in combat, he would not be efficient. So that's why I think. But I got along with him good, and he just seen him go. But a lot of these lieutenants didn't stay very long. And then they brought in a captain, I think. They claimed he was in a reserve. He was quite old. I said, what did they send him in to the infantry for? You got to have young blood in you to keep up with, the running around and hitting the ground and all that. So anyway, we went overseas. They had a guy named Mike Muskie. And you probably heard that name. He didn't want the job. They forced him to be the company commander of B Company, and he was a first lieutenant. And he's from upstate New York. I've never seen him at a reunion, because if I did, I would have went up to him, say, how are you? But I never saw him. He belongs to the association. His name is on the roster, but he never showed up. Loversville is east of Syracuse, between Albany and Syracuse. Well, anyway, Mike Muskie, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but he was caught in Hurlsheim. He was a prisoner in Hurlsheim. Then we got this Lieutenant Ebbage. And Ebbage took over at Hurlsheim. Now, I heard stories last night that Ebbage was in charge of the 17th Battalion at Hurlsheim. He just took it on his own. He thought he was, a ranking officer. He was just a first lieutenant. And he ordered Lieutenant Whalen to take over the battalion. He said, you are in charge of the battalion. I'm going to take over B Company. He says, that's a bigger job, taking over the company. So Whalen, he had to follow orders, so he took over the battalion until he got somebody to replace him. He wasn't there very long, I'm sure. But Captain Ebbage developed into quite an officer, a leader, as far as I'm concerned, because I was his half-track driver, became a half-track driver in January, the same month of the Hurlsheim. I was called. At that time, I was driving the ammunition truck, half-track, and there never was we never trained that we were going to have an ammunition. Well, how is this ammunition spare ammunition going to be carried? Ammunition is heavy, and all kinds of 50 caliber, 30 caliber, and bazooka, and the rockets for the bazooka, and we had motor. Every platoon had 2 motors, a 60 millimeter and a 80, I believe. The big one is 80. And those are heavy. Those shells are all heavy. And those boxes are heavy. You got to be strong to pick them up and move them around the half-track or pile them in the half-track. Well, I did that until this call came one night. It was after Hurlsheim. No, it was before Hurlsheim, I'm sorry. It was before Hurlsheim. And we've been fighting all day. And they made the CP a house. It was a big house, and it was a CP. They told me where the CP was, and I went to it. And Sergeant Motzinger, I don't know if you ever heard his name. He was my communication sergeant. He was actually the guy who was behind me because I worked for him. You know, I was under his control in Barclay. That's where I met him. He came to Barclay, and we were very close. And he always used to say to me, he says, "I want you to stay with me." I said, "Well," I said, "it's up to the officers, you know," because he was in charge of communication with radios, all in charge of all the radios, and then what they call the signal, you know, the panels. We'd go out, all headquarter guys, and they'd lay these panels for air to, you know, for help. Would say for help, how to signal for help from the ground, and different signals.
How would,
the different
explain-
colors, different colors.
Okay.
These panels were different colors, and how you laid them on the ground, the air guys in the air could tell if you were in trouble or if you needed help because there's nobody around. And I went through all that. I had all that experience, and I want to backtrack a little bit. We had a guy, you know, a flag, you know, said B Company on there. Well, this is before I even got to Texas. One day, they had some guy, and they didn't like the way he walked. He couldn't keep in step. So the first sergeant at that time was Acting Sergeant O'Sullivan. And he says, "Ignatti," he says, "I want you to carry that guide on." I says, "Yeah, okay." I never refused, so I got up there, and when you know, for all retreats at night, when you retreat the flag, you had to carry that guide on. Any place you went, you had to carry the guide on. Even on a march, on the twice we had 30-mile marches, and I had to carry the guide iron banner, and carry my rifle. I was a rifle, still remained a rifleman, and with a pack, your bedroll, which is the shelter, one half shelter of a tent, and one blanket. You roll it right up tight, and it looks like this, you know. And the regular pistol belt, which is the wide one. You know, you carry clips in it. If you carry a carbine, it's a narrower belt and it doesn't have the slots. See, for there's 8 bullets in a clip for a rifle. I went through the training at Campbell, and I became an expert rifleman. I scored pretty high, and a carbine also, sharpshooter carbine. And let's see, where are we now? I kind of backtracked back and forth.
I want to talk to me about what it was like as you left England and went to Lahore. What were you thinking? What were you thinking inside?
Well, I'll tell you, we weren't on this trip. We were infantrymen, and I expected the worst. Because, I mean, when they trained us, they says, "You're an infantryman. You're not just calling on somebody. You're an infantryman. And it's either you or the other guy. If somebody shoots at you, the enemy shoots at you, don't hesitate in shooting him." Well, there was men who didn't like that. You know, they didn't want to fire at anybody. I don't know. I'm not saying I was out of the ordinary, but that never bothered me. Never bothered me. That kind of talk never bothered me. I mean, if it's, you know, if you get into combat, that's what you're there for. And if you're not, you're just not going to be around very long. But getting back to, we took us 14 days to get over there, you know that. We were on the Empress of Australia. It was an old ship owned by the German Kaisers, the Kaiser of Germany during World War I. The English took it away from them. And there was all the infantry were on there. All the 3,000 infantrymen of the 12th were on there, and plus somebody else, some of the other outfits. And that was a hell trip, one of the worst trip of the whole of the Army life. And anybody said it was a good trip, they're sick, because we went down. They put us down to the bottom deck. I mean, down to the last one. I don't know. I think it was a D or something like E, and it was run by the British. And all we had to eat there was potatoes and cabbage. That was a steady diet that we had. Breakfast, no such thing. Dinner, that was it. Or dinner, I don't eat well once a day. They had barbed wire all around there because they had brought us German troops to the United States who were in camps were living better than we were going to live, you know. They were out of the danger of war, and they were all in different cages like in there, down there. It was all barbed wire. You had to be careful you didn't get caught. You know what barbed wire is? You'd get cut up in a hurry. You would fall up against it. And no place, there's no bunks. You were sleeping on the floor. The bathroom backed up, and water was coming out of the damn bathroom. You couldn't even go in the bathroom. And it's conditioned like that. They call those good conditions. They were not good conditions. It was hell. 14 days of that we put up with. At night, just as soon as it got dark, down. They wanted you down because they were afraid if you lit up a cigarette. There was 35 ships, total 35 ships of all kinds of supplies and passengers in a convoy. They used to send them over in large quantities like that because there was more protection close by. At night they'd get closer to each other, and the ships would not have any light. There wasn't a light. They were navigating in darkness, total darkness. For submarine reasons, you know, the Germans were still pretty active with their submarines. And we got to Liverpool. It was early evening, and we unloaded right away and into trains. And then we went to an area. There were no buildings. It was farmland. And early in the morning, just as it got daylight, heavy dew. We were walking around this heavy dew. Feet got wet and everything, and they didn't seem to know what the heck to do with us. Finally, I don't know how we got there. Now, I lost that part. It was with trucks came and got us, or we walked a distance. We went to a place called Tedsworth. There was a barracks there, but the infantry did not go into the barracks. They went in tent city. There was a tent city there, and the tent cities were 8-man tent. They call them. That 8 men could sleep there, and they didn't have bunks. They had these portable, fold-up little cots with canvas in them. And that's all that was there. No blankets, and they had a round oak stove, which you might call, in the middle of it, and it only could burn while there was somebody awake. Just as soon as you were going to go to sleep, you had to turn that off because they had somebody come around checking the fire, and there was no door. Just open it up and get in, and they could tell if the guys were sleeping, they'd wake you up and say, "Put that fire out," because if it catches on fire, it would burn us up there, which happened, and not while we were there, but it happened. And it wouldn't take long for that tent to go into fire. But we stayed there for 6 weeks. And we trained a little bit. I mean, it's up to the officers. They get their orders, how much training you guys got to get. And I went to church. I'm a Catholic, and I went to church out in a field on Sunday. They call the say there's a chaplain out there. Everybody's a chaplain. What makes no difference what religion. So I went out there and prayed and I accepted a pass to London, which was about 100 miles, and you go by train and stay 2 nights, I guess, 3 nights. I still have my passes. And we went once with quite a few of the guys from the company. We'd come back.
What was training like? What was your training like? Did you train?
Oh yeah, yeah, training. No live rounds. Just handling the gun, aiming, carrying. By the way, I also was an expert bayonetter. One of 14 of the 1,000 was picked by a Lieutenant Lasorda. He was a Brooklynite. He was about 6'3", and boy, talk about giving commands. This guy could give commands. And he liked what he saw, and he picked his 14 men. He said, "You guys are going to demonstrate to the battalion." He said, "We're going to have a little more training by ourselves." They had a regular bayonet course there, out in the field. See, dummies, there were silhouettes and what have you. And And that's not an easy thing to go through. Bayoneting is hard. You do it with a rifle with a bayonet on it. Real, you attack the dummies. Sadora, boy, I cannot forget that man. I still adore him. Oh, he was terrific. His commands. He would motivate you with his commands. And the 14 of us. I think there was 2 from the B company, the rest were scattered from the other companies. And I get chilled when I think about it. When he get us started, and all these other guys watching us. And we went through it, because a lot of these guys, they just went through the motions, and never got to the point where the way he put us 14 guys in. As a matter of fact, when we got through, you guys did a hell of a job. You got the afternoon off. Big deal. We were pooped out anyway, young as we were, 22 years old, most of us. And he says, you guys are all okay. He said, you didn't let me down. I said, okay, good. Got the afternoon off. He said, I want to make sure you get the afternoon off. I want to talk to you first sergeant. I said, all right, you're going to go to all 4 companies and talk to the first sergeant. So that was so much for the bayonet. I didn't want to miss that out. That was quite a deal there. I don't know how many days we trained hard.
So everybody was trained on the bayonet, but you...
But not to the point that I think if they were to go into combat, I don't think many of them used a bayonet or ever got into... You have to get... That's hand-to-hand fighting, you call that. You've got to be like from here where you are. If you come after... If a German comes after me with a bayonet, they'll tell you, fix bayonets, like at nighttime, fix bayonets. Or if you think you're going to come in contact real close, fix your bayonet, put your bayonet on. That means put it on. It doesn't take long. There's the outer case, which is already on your belt. You just take it out, and you clip it on the end of the gun, and it locks itself. And even if you stab something, you pull it out, it stays put in place. So then the horizontal, the horizontal attack, which that's when the guy's still up. When the enemy's still up, you hit him on a jaw, you can kill him, or on the head. Especially if you hit him on the head, the butt of the gun is enough to kill you if you swing it right, if you come in there right. And there's different, it's not all stabbing, But he used to say, stab again. And then give the next, whatever it was. I kind of forgot some of the, but there's a lot to it,
Did you ever face that?
No. And never? No, but I came very close. I came very close to an enemy. Should I tell it now?
Yeah.
In Bach, Germany, B-O-C-K, Bach, Germany, a very small town, one street town. Mm-hmm. We were in there. We had, we used to, after when they split up, they even split the commands. There's 3 commands, A, B, and C, and then you've got an infantry battalion, you got artillery battalion, and you got tank battalion. You had 714, and then you had the 43rd and the 23rd. There's 3 different tank battalions. Well, 23rd, we worked with the 23rd. They was always with us. And we had, I think, B company of the 23rd Tank Battalion. How many tanks it consists of? I don't know. I'd say 15. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not for sure because I never questioned that. But we had light tanks leading the nose. And then we had a half-track infantryman, because the infantry protects the tanks. When the Germans come charging with their bazooka, their bazooka is more effective than our bazooka. They had a rocket that you could see it floating in the air, and I have seen it a couple times. They float in the air, hit a tank, which will be American tanks, and the heat of this rocket would melt a hole, and you're going through several inches of steel. And once it gets through, in the back, they usually aim for the center of the tank, and that gets all the personnel. The shrapnel would get all the people there. There's a gunner, there's a car commander, and there's at least 3 or 4 guys there. Then you have in the front, you got your driver on the left, and you got the assistant driver, and they get in from the front, But the guys inside, they, when they're under attack, they button up. That means they put the hatch down. So then they look through a vision of about this much, you know. It's all, the driver's the same way. They drive with that kind of vision. We do in a half track. We button up, we drop our windshield, and there's a thickness there of a ½ inch. And all you can see out is this much. And at nighttime, you drive. We drove many nights in the combat. You know, we were in the enemy territory, and we were driving. And it's the worst time to drive. The worst time, because the enemy is waiting out there for you in darkness, and we can't see him. But that happened a lot of time. I couldn't understand that. Night fighting, I couldn't see that. Daytime was enough, but nighttime is hell. Let's see, where we go now. We were in England. You didn't say how we crossed the channel. We crossed the channel on the LSTs, they call them. And we were all night long crossing the channel. I think it was 80-some miles at the place where we crossed in Southampton. And I had the ammunition truck, half track then already. Because that's why we waited 6 weeks to get all our equipment from the United States.
And did I understand that your equipment had gotten there, but Patton and his guys took the equipment, so then you had to wait for more equipment, or is that?
Well, that was over there in France. He was supplies. He'd steal it. You don't want to say steal, but he'd grab everything. He used to be placed by himself and his Jeep driver at an intersection where the supply lines came. And these guys knew where they had to go, you know, what outfit. Like the 7th Army would be on the right, going in that direction towards Germany. We were in the 7th. The 12th was in the 7th most of the time, but we were with Patton at one time. And he used to guide them his way. And the guy said, no, I'm supposed to go this way. You go this way, he would tell him. And don't give me any lip. There he is, a 3-star general, you know. He's in charge. And his nickel plate revolver, as we always admired, you know, which was a handsome thing. And he always wore knickers, you know, like the golfer that died, you know. He always had those knickers. Of course, they're different, the military knickers. Cavalry, they call them the cavalry knickers, which cavalry's no longer in existence in the service. And yeah, he used to take the supplies away from everybody. That's what he wanted to do.
Did you ever hear him talk?
No, I never. Yes, on TV. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that wasn't his voice though. That was just the play. No, a person I never met the guy. Oh, the day he got killed. The day he got killed, I went over the same at the Autobahn. I was going to Cologne, from Frankfurt to Cologne, with 20 trucks. We were coming back. We went there for coal, for the German people. And it took one day to get down. It was 160 miles, but the Autobahn, you know, with a lot of bridges were out. You had to go off the Autobahn, into towns, come back up again. And we had one lieutenant in charge of us. And every time we took those trips, half those trucks never came back. Because they drive, a lot of these guys didn't know how to drive the 4-wheel drives and shift. They were poor shifters, and they tear up transmissions and drive shafts. They were laying all over the road like crazy. They had to come out and tow them in. Well, I had the experience of driving before I went in, but they never would give me a chance to drive the one on the service. I asked, you know, drive a half track, and they never gave. When I got overseas, like they couldn't cut me in enough pieces. For first an ammunition, then another half track, and then the company half track. But anyway, as I say, I wound up being I drove the best half track, the most important half track of the company for the rest of the war.
Tell me what it was like, where you were at, and what it was like the first day of battle.
Oh, the first night it was.
First night.
We had been I was 24 years old the day before, in a place called Lunenville, and there was a barracks there. The Germans had been occupying it and left it filthy, and they wanted us to occupy it for the night, and we never got to stay there for the night. We moved as soon as it got dark. The orders came through. Orders come through any old time, on the radio, and we had to move out. The word is moving out, and so in 15 minutes or 20 minutes, So everybody is ready to move. They're all loaded up and everything. And we got up to the first night was the Maginot Line. They had we were relieving the 36th, I believe, 36th Infantry, and you could see those guys coming out with their jeeps. They don't have much equipment, you know, loaded to the gills. Some had tops on, and some did, and some were on trucks, 6x6s, as they say. They didn't have the equipment, and they're 18,000 men. You know, they have 18,000 men. And during World War II, all the infantry. We had a lot of infantry companies, and they were all that size. And these guys were coming out, and it got dark, and our tanks. We got into an area, and the commander was Captain. The one that got Muskie. Yeah, it was Captain Muskie. Gave us the order to get into a circle and close up. In other words, get the bumper to bumper like. And I was still the ammunition guy then. And I got out of the ammunition because I wanted to know what the heck we were going to do. I saw the tanks, and it's dark. They don't even know, you know. They didn't say to me, "Get the hell back in the half track." They didn't say anything. Just I got up close right away. A guy from Tennessee, Willie Wins, got his foot in front, the long side of the one tank, and they had cleats sticking out. These were extra cleats. They stick out probably almost foot and a half, not quite a foot and a half, about 14 inches, maybe 16 inches. And one of them caught his foot, and he wound up into the hospital. They had to take him back quick, you know. I guess toes or something. Anyway, he finally came back at the end. He almost came back. And everybody, all the officers, the tank officers, our officers, everybody was reviewing what the heck they were going to do. And it was the Maginot Line. And it was raining, cold. It was December what, 6th, 7th, something like that. And all I kept saying is, boy, this isn't a good night to go get started in combat. And then the word came, we had to move in. And we start moving in, and closer to the Maginot Line. And artillery was coming in on us. The Germans knew where we were. They knew the distance, where we were, you know, and everything. And those artillery shells were very close. Some were going to the right, some to the left, some over our head. Some were dropping kind of close. I didn't hear of any direct hits, but they were there. They were coming in, the 88s. And they found out that we heard so much about the Maginot Line, so we found out. The guys had dismounted. They got off the track. They had to go up there and fight it on foot. And one of the first casualties was a guy named Thomas Tritipool from Indianapolis, Indiana. And he was my sergeant for a while. I had the squad when I first came in as an acting corporal, and then he decided to make a change, and let's say he bucked hard for it, so he got it. And Tritipool got it. He was the first platoon leader, and he was the first one that got hit. He asked the guys, "Come on, let's go over this hill," and the guys didn't follow him. But he got up to the crest, and the skylight gave his position that he was, you know, it's like a shadow, like a floodlight, and they nailed him. And then they tried to get him. They tried to go up there and get him, and just as soon as the enemy saw him, they were getting small fire, like rifle fire or machine gun fire. So they couldn't save him. But he was cut down. They claimed that he was cut down around the knees, his legs, and he was still alive. They could hear him. He wanted help, but they couldn't get to him. So he was the first casualty of B Company. So that was the first night at the Maginot Line.
Was that, how was that to see your first second deal and had to do that the first one? Does that make it worse than the second or third? Or?
Well, he was the first in our company. But the first casualty, they claim, was a tanker commando, a tank commander. And he
was 24 years old, and he was up in the gun turret. I think he was in charge of the 23rd. I can't think of his name right now, but he has a son who's a general.
Miggs.
Miggs. You got it. Miggs. And they caught him around the upper part of his body, because when you stick your head out, you're not too far out. Your arms, I would say around this is exposed, and the rest of your body is inside, but they caught him on top. And he was a well-trained, he was a regular Army man and all that. He was the first victim, they claimed, for the division. They always said that he was the first victim, first casualty, not victim, first casualty. And his son, I had met his son. Heck of a guy. Mother, his wife, they have come to reunions, you know. I guess a mother who has remarried. And he was supposed to have come at Virginia deal, but he was over there in Bosnia, I guess. But he's back in the States again. Anyway, he went up the ladder pretty fast. He must be a pretty good leader. But the Maginot Line, one night, Whalen, we were pinned down there. We weren't making much progress. He came up to, he had walked from the Maginot Line to this house, where a lot of the half-track drivers were, and he asked for a volunteer. He asked for a volunteer to go up at night when it got dark, because they couldn't go up there unless it got dark. And he says, we gotta get coffee to those guys. We gotta get some hot dogs. I mean, not hot dogs, but we gotta get some donuts. And the kitchen is now making the donuts, and they're gonna have big pans of coffee. And we're going up there when it gets dark, pitch dark. Who wants a volunteer? No volunteers. He looked at me. He says, "You're it." I said, "I'm it." Yeah. He says, "You're the last half-track driver that was put on. The ammunition half-track was I was a new driver." See? I said, "Yeah, okay. What time?" He says, "I'll get back to you." He says, "I'll tell you when to get your half-track over to where the kitchen is." All right. He got back to me and he says, "Come on, we're ready to go." I said, "How many?" "Just you and I." "Oh, okay, interesting." Anyway, we got the coffee in those big pans. Yeah, I mean, if you ever saw them, that they cook in with. And on bivouacs, that's how they carry the coffee in those things. I don't know how many cups of coffee there is. Hundreds of them. We had just fresh donuts. And we went, and we got to a spot, and he says, "Hold it." "Oh, what happened?" And he says, "I want to check that bridge." He says, "We're going across this bridge. I want to check it first." I said, "Okay, don't move." I said, "All right." No lights on. In total darkness. He's up in a gun tour, you know, hitting me on the shoulder, right, left. So he came back. He says, "I couldn't see any wires." He says, "I don't think this bridge is set for blowing up or anything." He says, "Okay, cross it. Let's cross it." I said, "You better tell me." He says, "I can hardly see it." You know, I couldn't hardly see it. It was narrow to begin with. So I crossed the bridge and made our way over to a pillbox. And then they start calling these fellas in, you know, one platoon at a time, come in, have coffee, and send them back on outside. They were out all night. I don't know how many nights. In foxholes, some had foxholes. And they all would come and see me. And one of the guys told me, he says, "No, Triple just got it." I said, "How?" And he told me. That's too bad, you know. Hate to hear about those things, but it used to happen. Anyway, one by one, and then when they got through, I had to bring all that stuff back to the kitchen. But that was another time. I said, "It's okay, you know. I'm dead, so that was it." Anyway, that and crossing the Rhine was an experience that I'll never forget. Pontoon bridges, you know, it's like this. You had to keep your distance because they didn't want too much weight in one particular spot. And the speed limit was around 5 miles an hour. You had to watch your accelerator. You know, it was real steady because it's up and down. It was hard to keep your foot on the accelerator. I was glad to get over on the other side. I'll tell you that. I was counting the seconds, and we got over there. Everybody got over there safe. All our company and everything. It was built by our own engineers, you know. and they built it under fire. But the smoke, it was 5 o'clock in the morning, we crossed it, and they had smoke stream up, the engineers did, and you could, the ceiling was very low, in other words. If the Germans sent planes out, they couldn't see us. And that's what made it, you know, efficient, the smoke. So we got all there. Once we crossed the Rhine, it seemed like the word was go, go, go. 37 days, go, go, go. I don't remember getting a night's sleep and all that time, and I ran out of gas. In April, I was exhausted. Yeah, I was sleeping all the time. A lot of times the guys were at nighttime, they'd sitting in a half-track sleeping, you know, napping until we got attacked. And the driver is not sleeping, you know. He's driving all the goddamn time and looking out of that little peaky hole there and taking slaps on the shoulder and on the back, you know, and right, left, and slow it down. And well, you can't drive very fast because you don't know where you are. And if the night was pitch, the clouds were dark, you had no lights from the sky. A lot of times they say, watch the poles. You know, your poles in the street, that sometimes tells you where you are. And I got so I used to feel from the tires, the front tires, not from the track in the back. The tires used to tell me if I'm going on the shoulder, because it was rough. I could feel it from my road. The right wheel could hit a bump or something, and I knew I was right on the edge of the road. See, because a lot of times the car commander used to get he used to get careless and he thinks you were able to see. But many nights we moved in combat at nighttime. One night, this is a good one to tell you. One night we were out in the field. We crossed in the fields, you know. And sometimes I say, what the heck kind of maps? They're all these maps that the commanders had, you know, the company commander had. They're all taken by airplanes. They're air photographers. They take these maps. They're all field. And I used to have a lot of those maps in there because that's where the guy who took care of it, the soldier who took care of it, used to put them in these. It was a board, and he used to clip them all the way around, and so it'd stay in place and have plastic over the top, because the commander carried it on his lap all the time. He had that map in his lap all the time, and that's how he kept us from going into areas where we weren't supposed to go. But we hit this field, and all of a sudden everything stopped. The first sergeant was sleeping on the floor on my right, and the rest of the guys were asleep. And I saw tanks. I happened to the sky. There was enough skylight, and I saw a tank on my right, and he was firing and it was a wooded area, because he had tracers. He had some tracers, and the tracers pointed out to me where he was firing. So I never had any training with a 50 machine gun. I got up in there, didn't have anybody to operate that gun. All the time I was in it, I became the 50th the operator for that 50th ammunition. Got up there, and I started firing, because I had the belt it was in there, you know, and I had tracers. So I opened up, and the tanks were firing on and off, burst of fire, and once I saw that there was 2 trucks, I knew immediately, because I saw these trucks. I said, they're ammunition trucks, German ammunition trucks. So I got into, and I started firing, and the first sergeant says, cease firing, cease firing. I said, well, we got 2 trucks. I says, they must be ammunition trucks. And he says, well, cease firing. I says, I will in a little while. And those empty shells were falling on him. I disturbed his sleep, see? He didn't like it. Oh, he was madder than the son of a gun at me. Well, he could sleep, but I was awake, driving, and I fired away at will. And this is the honest truth. I'm not telling you any baloney, boy. And this is one of the times I enjoyed firing that 50 caliber machine gun. And those 2 trucks just blew up. They had all kinds of ammunition. The place was lit up like day. And we were quite a ways away from it. I bet we were 400 feet away from it. And it was the sky, everything. It was a wooded area. They were hidden in this wood. Oh, there was nothing left of them, because we drove pretty close to them to go around it and around this town. And the people, you know, everybody's got their shades down, but you could see them a little bit peeking out of the windows.
And at what place did you get your bar?
Huh?
Your bar?
My combat.
Your combat bar.
My combat bar. I got it in February. It says right on there. February of '45 is when they issued it to us.
Now,
To all those names, all the guys there got the bar.
hey, now, was that based on one battle?
No.
Or your length of
No,
time?
no.
or
There's
what?
quite a story to that. You know, it originated back in '41. They started with the combat infantry bar, and it's interesting. There's another bar similar to that. I don't know whether you know that. They call it the sharpshooters bar, and it looks like the combat bar, but it doesn't have the wreath that goes around like that. The combat, it's got that wreath. Where the other one, it hasn't got the wreath, and on there it's got a rifle for sharpshooter. See? So I have both of them because I was a sharpshooter rifle. And but the combat bar, the infantry bar, I've been in. You know, I belong to the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and I belong to the American Legion for the heck of it, I call it. And I pay my dues, but I'm not too close to it. And combat with it. I figure I'm a combat individual, and that's the closest to me. Anyway, the bar was given the notice, but you didn't get the bar right away. You know, this is what they call the one I have is a government issued. You know, notice. By the way, my little granddaughter's going to wear it tomorrow. So, I choke up on that. I don't know if anybody drank out of that.
No, it's yours.
Well, so anyway, I've been to many meetings, and different guys, they have what they call a regular organization now, people who have combat infantry bar, and most veterans say that is their most precious thing that they've got. Of a lot of medals. A lot of them have Purple Hearts and Bronze Stars, Silver Star, but when it comes to the combat, they think more of their combat.
Then why is that? I mean, you got it. 40 something people got it, I think you said.
I went in with 40 guys. There's more than 40 that got it. No.
Okay.
Practically all the guys that were up there for any length of time at all got that. They deserve anybody. You go into combat, believe me, if you go into combat, you're in there an hour, you deserve to have that.
Okay, so that's not like the Silver Star or something. Well, like the Purple Hearts, you had to be shot.
Yes.
Yes.
Then they had the clusters.
Yeah, the
if you have
clusters.
the second time, third, fourth, whatever. The Bronze Star, if you're an infantryman, you're automatically supposed to get the Bronze Star. Well, I never applied for it. Even though they had it in the Hellcat News many times, what to do and everything, I never applied for it. But they claimed that if you got the combat, you were supposed to get it. And, well, I'd better tell this story because this bugs me anyway. We did talk about Bach, Germany. We started there when we got attacked there. I never finished the story, or did I? Did I say anything about throwing grenades? No.
No.
I didn't go to that. All right. I was back maybe halfway into the column, you know, with the tanks and the other half tracks. There were other half tracks ahead of me, and it was a hot town. We got hit pretty hard there. They claimed it was 200 German SS there, and they were willing to fight an armored column coming into town, and they had nothing bigger than rifles and bazookas. But they hit the first tank and stopped the column, and that's what they do. They wait for you to get into town, they hit him, and then the guys who were in the first tank they got hit, they got out. Once they get out, they either have to surrender or they usually kill them too. They'll kill you without surrendering. But usually the guys will get out and throw their hands up, you know. But they know if they stay in the tank is liable to explode, especially if they hit it with a rocket. Anyway, it got. I was way back about, I don't know, maybe not to the end. There was other half tracks ahead of me, behind me. Captain Ebbridge says, Sal, I mean, not Sal, he never called me Sal, always by the last name, Ignatti. He says, there's a sniper up there, up on the embankment. The embankment was about 5 foot high along the road. He says, he just got the commander in the front and one ahead of him, or maybe possibly 3. He says, get a grenade and get out there. Well, I got from underneath my steering wheel and grabbed the grenade and crawled through his feet because he was in my way going out the passenger door. And I went for the bank and kept my head down because my head would have showed up. So I kept down, followed along the bank, and I got to where he was, and the company commander told me, he said, I'll tell you when you get there. He said, I can see him from here. I said, all right. So when I got there, he hollered at me, you're there. So I looked to see where he was, and there he had the rifle pointing right at me, but he did not fire it, whether he froze at the trigger, because there's such a thing as freezing at the trigger. So I immediately got down and pulled a pin on fragmentation grenade. And you're supposed to, they train you, 1 jab, 2 jabs, 3 jabs, not fast, at a reasonable speed. Or 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Well, I used the 1,000. Threw the grenade, and this, I knew he was a young guy because I saw him the first time. But then he must have put his head down. I didn't see no head, but I could see where the hole was, foxhole was. Threw the grenade in there, went in there, and he threw it out. He threw it out, and it burst after he threw it out. And he didn't get no shell because the burst went this, straight up. And I was protected from the bank. So the captain yelled at me, come on back. He said, you didn't get him. So I'm back and threw in another grenade, and I went through the same procedure. And I'll be darned if I didn't do the same thing the second time. I did it too fast, see. And he says, come on back. So he gives me a white phosphorus grenade because we didn't have any more fragmentations. We usually have them hanging in front of on top of the windshield, see. There's a place to hang them. And I went back. I said, boy, I've got to get him this time. I said, this is twice. So I pulled a pin, and I counted slow and threw it, and I heard a hell of a yell. And I said, oh, I got the son of a gun. That's what you deserve for killing our boys. And the one that was ahead of us was a guy named Rooney from Pittsburgh, a hell of a good friend of mine. I wanted revenge, boy, and I figured I got it. So that's that. And anyway, I was written up for a Silver Star a couple of months later, and I didn't even have no knowledge about it, thought nothing of it. It was Motzinger who wrote it up. He made me read the letter. He says, all I got to do is get the signature from the company commander, he says, and I'm going to send it into the clerk, company clerk. Okay. I thought none of it. And then I heard, months later, I heard that they switched names and gave it to the first sergeant who signed to stay in the service, and he got the Silver Star, and I never got it. And he stayed in the service, became an officer. He was in Korea. He lives in the state of Kentucky. And one guy says he's going to come to Louisville. To one of the Louisville, they had 4 different reunions. I missed the first one. I wasn't around then. And the guy says, you want me to call him? I says, call him? I said, I don't want to see this man. I says, I don't want to see him. I don't want to talk to him. I said, I don't want no part of him. And he says, oh, he said, I thought maybe, no. I says, didn't you hear what happened? I said, what this guy did? He says, no. So I told him, he says, oh, I don't blame you. Well, okay. So that's it. Forget about it. Don't even mention to him. His name was, by the way, Clyde Pendleton. Clyde Pendleton. And he was from the state of Oklahoma. Where are we?
Well, it's time for us to have to quit.
I said, okay, good.
So what I need, we're not through.
No,
now.
okay.
But we're going to have to quit this.
We gonna do?